said, everybody's very generous. I want to share with you some things I'm thinking, so it could be 15 minutes. That's what I was hoping it would be. There's no, I'm literally just want to share it with you, not trying to make any long pitch. I've got some things to hand out so you can take those with you. Just sure.
I've got just a brief statement.
Fair enough, that's fine. And there's no public comment today, and there won't be any public comment tomorrow. So if you are, I'm ready. Yep. All right. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Ask you all to rise. And if Mr. Bateson, if you could lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. This is the first of two Board of Selectmen budget meetings. Especially today's, it's an opportunity for the Board of Selectmen to discuss anything they choose or identify issues. It may be a fairly short meeting. We've had some pretty extensive discussions at the Board of Finance level. There's no public comment today or tomorrow. However, certainly that Saturday morning session, there was plenty of public comment, and I know I had a chance to sit in on most of that. So with that kind of to kick things off, I've got just a couple of sheets of information I'd like to share with my colleagues here and some thoughts I had. So let me do this. So here's one sheet. Here's one sheet, and if anybody's interested, there are a few extras right up there. As a start, what this does is lay out initially some different accounting issues, and Ms. Gardner or Mr. Mayor can step us through some of that.
Yep.
Then the next segment, it says less expense adjustments for known information. Those are items that came up during the Board of Finance hearings that are pretty, what I'm going to call pretty straightforward, and are adjustments that we would kind of all make because they're changes to numbers. It's not cuts per se, as they are just changes to numbers that were included in the budget. And then stepping down, a segment that I wanted to let you both know that I was going to be recommending tomorrow. It starts with the teacher retirement contribution to the state based on the news article that appeared on Friday with the Speaker of the House saying that won't pass, looking at what I would propose restoring in terms of cuts as part of that. But still a total cut of $5 million, and then a reduction in the contribution to surplus, because we basically put into surplus a contribution for 10% of the increase. If we're reducing the increase expenses in the budget, we can also then reduce the contribution to surplus without doing any harm to the surplus or the adjustment. And when you boil all that down, it comes out to about, with those restorations, then the balance going towards reducing the tax point. And the tax mill rate would be then at a 2.2% increase instead of the 4.5%, with some supporting documents which will help with this, but also help in terms of anything you're considering. Here's a sheet with a schedule that's put together, just will help you look at, if you go down the left-hand column, for whatever that decrease is from where we were, or where we are now in terms of the proposal, you can see what a mill rate would be, what the prospective mill rate increase would be, and then the reserve for uncollected.
Quick question.
Go ahead.
When you say from where we are now, do you mean from where the blue book is, or from where you are?
from where the Blue Book is.
The Blue
Because
Book is.
mine is a recommendation that I will make, but it has not been made in
Gotcha.
that sense.
Okay.
So if you look at this, and simply, if you take a look down at decrease column, and take that down to, here are some extras if anybody wants that sheet. You go down the left-hand column, and let's go down to 6 million.
Where you are?
Yes, if there's a 6 million decrease, that would translate into a mill rate of 26.03,
2.28.
which would be a 2.28.
Gotcha.
Which is just above, we're at 2.20.
Gotcha.
Okay, so that's just how that worksheet works. So that would work with any type of cut, any type of anything. But that will help you see how I got to where I was also. All right, and then lastly, here's a third worksheet. And what this does is just take a look at a median home. For a median home assessment of $348,950, you can see the mill rate is at 25.45.
That's today?
That's today. And then with whatever adjustments, the assessment stays the same in the left-hand column for different mill rates. So you can see at 26.05 for a mill rate, that would be a tax liability of just over $9,000, but it would be an increase in $209 per taxpayer, per household,
Okay.
per property. All right, and that's just for the median, so you get a flavor for what that means on the taxpayer. And again, those would work for any combination. Any question on those? Any questions? Would you, if you had more detailed questions on those, we could certainly have Linda Gardner take you
Wanna
through
go
anything. If you'd like to, but it's not required, you can peruse it overnight. We can talk in more detail tomorrow on that.
What's the contingency, 919? Is that the PETA settlement?
No,
What is that?
that's the treatment. We are using a salary reserve and bond premium as a revenue item. And I think Bob sent you an email and the schedule explaining this on March 3rd. If we use it as a contra expense rather than a revenue item, it allows us to reduce the contribution to surplus by the $190,000. So it had, those by themselves have no budgetary effect, but it does have the effect of letting us reduce the contribution to surplus to remain the fund balance level.
So that 919 was in contingency, we're taking it out.
It's going to hit contingency
It was-
as a contra expense.
So we had it included in revenue, now we're moving it down.
Right,
The-
as a contra expense, right.
The 190, it was part of the supplemental contribution to surplus.
Yep.
Because we're in essence lowering expenses
Yep.
rather than changing revenue. Because we lowered the expenses, we can reduce that by 10% of whatever that reduction is. That's where the 190 comes from. And it comes out of the line that's supplemental contribution to surplus.
Okay, the tax collector, I assume that's because we have a new tax collector at department head, less?
Correct.
Okay. 273 health insurance, is that Aon through February or January?
Aon through February.
And that's the only information we're going to have, right?
Yes, we only go to February.
The RTM will get an update in March, but we won't, obviously we won't have that by tomorrow.
BOE budget, I thought was 2033. That's, or you're just going to keep it, doesn't matter to you? BOE. I thought your
That's-
original was 2033. Is that 33 not?
Just restoring 2 million.
Okay. And the 32.4 part-time, that's to restore the library to full hours?
If you look, there are 4, 5, 6 items in total for the library. They add up to just over 300,000 that the reduction was.
Okay, yep. So the 32, the 29, the 16, and 16, I assume, the 16 and 26, that's to get us back to the Sunday hours.
Yes.
And the 179 is restoring full material?
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Correct.
To material to what she originally wanted.
Yes.
Correct.
Okay, I'm good.
Same thing with the 4 DPW pieces of equipment and $1 million additional in payment. And the big one at the bottom is the $530,000 we get to remove from the contribution of surplus because of the overall reduction.
The redemption of bonds, that's just the amortization of the discount, right? That will, was,
I'm going to say yes, but I'm going to,
That's the contra expense, or that's the use of the.
now we're putting it back underneath bond expense. Okay.
Reduced bond expense.
all right, so I wanted to get that in your hands so you can review that before tomorrow's meeting. Any other topics of conversation? Mr. Timiak,
Yeah.
did you have something?
Well, I do. I want to say, tomorrow I'd like to vote on a budget which doesn't increase the mill rate by more than 1.5%. I think it's very important to the taxpayers of Fairfield, the taxpayers of Connecticut. As we watch the state of Connecticut begin to unravel, they're sending very clear warning signs to us that we better get our acts together here. The $9 million per the article you cited on Friday, and all the information we have coming out of the state capitol, it appears that we dodged a bullet on that this year, although we will be taking hits in the long term from the state. This year, it's not going to be as rosy as it has been in years past, but I do believe Fairfield needs to prepare themselves. So that's one of the reasons why I want to vote on a budget tomorrow, which is around at or near or below 1.5% tomorrow. The other thing I want to make sure I do is make sure that the budget I vote on includes the $2 million restoration for the Board of Education. I see the hit coming from the state of Connecticut, and I don't think it's fair to have our town be scrambling the way the state and the governor's budget did to us, starting in the first week of February, after the Board of Ed had already voted on their budget and made their recommendations coming through. I think that reduction from your end and from the state is alarming, but I think it's a wake-up call to the Board of Ed that there's things we have to look at as a whole and determine where we want to be, because it's not getting any better. It's really not getting any better. So if this year's budget starts to set the tone for the next couple of years, I think that's the prudent thing to do for us as a town. The other thing I want to stress, and the room's filled with department heads here today, is I'd like to stress that what's happening at the state level appears to be out of our control right now, but we need to bring it back into our house. And we need to start making adjustments, and I would like to see contingency budgets from each department at 8 to 10% increase, decrease. I'm sorry, 8 to 10% decrease to start talking about those for next year. If we're faced with what we were given this year from the state next year, I don't know that there'll be a second chance for us to have those adjustments. So I'd really like to see us to start planning to reduce what we offer here in town, because it can't fall on the taxpayers. That's one of the reasons why the state is where we're at right now. And I read an article, I know you read one on Friday, I read one on Sunday, that is Fairfield County, the golden goose of Fairfield County, dying? That type of thing is what we have to look at. Right now, we have our home prices declining on the Greenfield Hill section of town, which has been paying the way for an awful long time in Fairfield, so there's going to be a readjustment in town coming forward. So I think the budget we vote on tomorrow needs to do those two things, like I said.
Mr. Bateson, any comments from you?
Yeah, this has been a pretty difficult budget season. I think we were all rocked by the $9 million. I think it was a useful exercise to include it in the budget to see what the actual effect of something like that would have on the town, and I think it was devastating. I really do. I agree with where we are with the $9 million, that we shouldn't include it. I agree with restoring the $2 million. I'm on board with that. As for the other stuff, I'm a little bit torn. I sat through all the budget presentations, and I heard all these department heads, and I know a lot of these people weren't happy with what they faced in their department, but I think they did the right thing by throttling back, and I think that I'm leaning right now towards keeping it there. I don't want to add to it, because I think that that puts us under a false premise that this issue's gone away. And I don't think it has. I think this has just been taken off our table temporarily. I think that the state is struggling. I mean, what they're asking for in union concessions, I don't think that that's going to happen. We still have to resolve the pension issue at the state level. I think somehow that's going to bleed down to us, whether it's going to be what they're talking about, tolls, or extra income taxes to the Department of Revenue Services. I just think that I'd like to go back and say, hey, everything's fine, guys, you can have your budgets. I'm not there. I just don't think that this problem's going to go away. I think this is the beginning of difficult budget sessions where Chris is going, where we're going to have to go through these exercises department by department and say, what can we live without? You know, where's the strategic planning at each department level? Can we sustain this manpower? Can we keep delivering these services? Involve the taxpayer, get them involved in this. We have a year to do this. I think we might be able to squeak by this budget at a reasonable increase. But next year, I just think that this was the opening salvo from Hartford. It's going to come back. And next year, I think we have 12 months to ramp up and get with them and say, how are we going to do this? Does a local taxpayer want to pick up the tab? If not, then we have to contemplate reduction of services, reduction of headcount, whatever they want. We have a year to do that. You know, I'm ready to move forward with that. But, you know, as for restoring everything to full throttle, I'm not there yet, so see you tomorrow.
All right. Just to comment on a couple of things. One is that let's look at just the process, because I've heard several folks in some of the emails I've gotten, as well as a comment here about what we include or what we don't include from the state's cuts. We don't control what the state is doing. The state can decide to cut us at any point. We can include it or not include it in the budget, and the state just doesn't care. They're going to do what they do up there. Fairfield is not one of their driving forces. How Fairfield feels about it, what we include in our budget, they just don't care. So everybody here is clear. As we go through the process, once we get past Thursday, when the Board of Finance votes, the Board of Selectmen will vote tomorrow, and we can change anything up or down, and that lets us make transfers from decrease one line and add it to another. On Thursday, the Board of Finance can do the same. They have the same capability. After that point in time, the RTN can only reduce expenses. They can only make reductions. Once the RTM votes, the first Monday in May, then in essence, our budget's locked. But more specifically, so everybody's clear, the Board of Ed budget's locked, and we can't go back to the Board of Ed without their support, cooperation, and agreement to make any further reductions. That means anything the state increases in terms of cuts from that point on comes out of the town side, which is about 35% of our budget, 25% once you remove about 10% worth of debt service that we also can't adjust. So that means that any further reductions are coming out of a very small piece and will definitely have dramatic impact on services provided by the town. So it still could be a very bumpy ride from here, but I want everybody clear on the process in terms of what it means step by step as we go through that. And where I do agree with my colleagues is that there's, no sign that next year will be any better, that the state doesn't look like it's solved their problems, and whatever they don't solve completely this year will come back and will be confronted with, no doubt, next year as they look at how to make up those cuts or those revenue shortfalls. So that's it, unless there's anything else from my colleagues. Mr. Timiak, you want a second shot?
No, I just want to question. Bob and Linda, are you guys available after the meeting to go over some numbers for like 15 minutes? Fantastic.
Great question asked in public. Any further comments from the board? All right, thank you all for coming, and we'll see you tomorrow. I have a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you.